Okay, welcome back. So yes, usually what I do is say, well, what did you learn from the last session? Well, we already did that, so thank you, Pastor Val. This today we're still going to do restore your heart health, nature's way. And the thing is, we are sometimes negligent of the fact that God gave us nature. If we just get back to nature, we might be doing all right. And so I'm so glad we can do that here. So today is called Eat for Strength, and that's what we're going to call it. And to remember this picture, she's taking her blood pressure, and we hope that her blood had nice, slippery inner lining of the blood vessels, so all the blood cells can go down, the white blood cells, the red blood cells, taking the oxygen and taking the fuel. And here is what we don't want to have. We don't want to have plaque. Usually to do with what we eat. Usually that comes, but not always, but often to do with what we eat. And we can see kind of the healthy versus non-healthy inside of our blood vessels. And usually, especially in the last 10 years, even children at age 10 years old are getting this, which is not so good, is it? It used to be called an adult type of a thing, but mainly because of the diet, the junk food, and the fast food industry, and the commercials, and advertising, and marketing. We end up just feeding young kids food that ends up creating this kind of problem in our blood vessels. And so, even so young. Right now, we're at the second one called Eat for Strength, and tonight, willpower. Basically, why you can't depend on it. Good for short term, but willpower is not a long-term strategy. And we'll talk about that because often it's our habits that get us into trouble. And truly, to tell you the truth, and I'll share my story tonight, a little bit of it, it ain't pretty. It's often hard to give up unhealthy habits. Why? Sometimes junk food just tastes so good. You don't want to give it up. So what do we do about that? That is a challenge that we need to have. Now, what did this represent? Remember? Yeah, so you can see the problem. The floor is wet. They're mopping up the floor. But what's the solution? It's to turn off the tap. And the idea is, this is like our symptoms. This is like heart disease. This is taking medicine for heart disease when the heart disease just keeps on coming. But if we can only get at the root cause of heart disease or other chronic diseases, then we're treating our bodies with more love and more respect. And that's kind of the idea. What does this remind you of? I shared this one earlier this morning.
The cause and effect
Yes.
can be a good thing if you're doing some habits that will give you good results. But at a certain point, if you're doing bad habits that are going to cause you to have like two diseases are coming up, if you could just stop what those causes are, you wouldn't have the bad effect.
And not just the one bad effect. In this case, two bad effects. As a matter of fact, remember we talked about the CHIP program, CHIP, Coronary Health Improvement Project. Well, you know they changed the name from Coronary Health Improvement Project to Complete Health Improvement Program. The reason why is because whatever people were doing to help their heart health, it was helping their diabetes disappear. It was also reducing a number of other symptoms. The very same lifestyle medicine protocol habits was stopping not just one line of harm, but other lines of harm as well. And it's kind of really good news if we can have a set of habits that will address all these different things in our body. Why? Because there's underlying mechanisms that affect all these other things. And I think it's just marvelous that we can have that. And then what did this all represent? This is just some of the books that are out there that talk about this stuff. Both mind and body. And as I look at them, I've read every single one. Every single one. I can't think of a book I did not read. in order to write my book. And I read more besides in order to do it. And the idea was that this is the science, but the science is now catching up with what God already wrote in the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy. That is the good news. I was just blown away every time I read another book. Every time I did a research, other studies that come out from some university, they're only coming up with the stuff the Seventh-day Adventist Church has been teaching for 150 years. It was really quite marvelous to see that affirmation. And so all I did was just package it and call it full power. That's all I did. And so F-U-L-L-P-O-W-E-R, it's an acronym. Every letter stands for something. And we'll talk about one of those letters today. And so this is just an example. Sometimes I call the seminar, if I'm doing the whole seminar, it could take 2 weeks, running on full power. You follow all these principles, running on full power, just like that guy. So the idea is kind of think of your Ferrari as representing your body. Your Ferrari, you take care of it. You put only high-octane fuel in your Ferrari, because if you didn't do that, you'd be ruining the machine. It was built and designed by the manufacturer to take high-octane fuel. Well, our bodies are just like that, only 1,000, million times more precise. Our bodies are high-precision machines. So, imagine then in your Ferrari or in your body, these cylinders. And the idea is that we kind of fill up on each of these cylinders, which represents health principles. And so you can take an assessment. Just go on the website, fullpower1.com, or in the book, and you can find out how are you doing with the habits that relate to each principle. So here's someone who's got 10, 10, 10. We give 20 points to launch your plan. That's the second L. Launch your plan, because that's actually doing it. That's actually including something in your morning routine or your evening routine. So we give 20 points. Everything else is 10 points. And that makes it equal to 100. The point is, nobody, and I mean, I've done this now for 3 or 4 years, nobody has ever gotten anywhere near 100. The highest was 86. Last time I did it, I got 78, which was like a silver. Only one person just managed to get into the gold, and that was 86. So the whole point is you're never going to get that. But the other point is, at least we know what we're shooting for. And every step we take toward the goal is progress. And that's all we want, is to make progress. Some people define happiness as making progress toward a goal. That's what we want, progress. So I would say, if you're going to get 100 out of 100, you're Superman on a good day. The idea is that if we can imagine each of these principles have habits that are attached to them, and then we can measure ourselves, which I haven't given you any tools to do that with, but that's the idea. And here's somebody, they got 58. They had 5 out of 10 on the F, on your superpower. They had 8 out of 10 on the U, on the spirituality. 6 out of 10, and on we go. So they end up with 58. The idea is we change how we feel by changing what we do. You start off by measuring what you're doing and all these principles. But you go through the intervention. You go through learning the new principles and acting on them. And then you measure yourself again. And then you see afterwards how you're doing. So you might have gotten 58, but then you're going to get, say, 70 after that. And obviously will feel better. Does that make sense at all? So that's just kind of depicting it. So we go from a sad face to a happy face. That's kind of the idea. You can download this at fullpower1.com. Usually we print it out and charge $10. But I was just working with somebody this week from the Sioux Church, and I said, I want you to put this on the website so people can download it for absolutely free. And so this week you can do that. And this is actually a part of a page of the workbook. This is called the Full Power Workbook. And you can look and see it all there. So I was talking to my wife a couple of years ago when I was writing this, and she says, you know, all those health principles are like golden nuggets. They're like gold in a treasure chest. So here's a treasure chest with full power written on it. And full power is all the health principles. And so we're going to take a look and open up the treasure chest and pull out those principles. Before I do that, I'm going to read this from Psalm 103. Remember I talked about those science books are only catching up on what God has already said. Well, here's one of the things that God already said 3,000 years ago. Talk about God who forgives all your sins and heals all your diseases, which is quite a claim, because that's measurable. It says, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with love and compassion, who satisfies your desires with good things. This is God talking. So, are your desires satisfied with good things? Living in this world of suffering, God can still come in and intervene. Then it says, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. And I kind of like the idea of an eagle flying around. There's no eagles here in Port Hardy, is there? There is. When I first arrived in Port Hardy, I saw my first eagle. I was playing slow pitch with Glenn Elliott. And I think I was outfield. I said, look everybody, there's an eagle. And everybody said, whatever. They've seen all kinds of eagles. It was my very first one. And that was in 1997 when I first arrived here. So, and the eagles has a freedom, and the flying and soaring like that. The Bible uses the eagle as a metaphor for us. So we can have that freedom and that strength and that soaring and all that kind of stuff. And here's what it says, that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Well, to me, I have to ask the question, is that just poetry? Or is that real? Like, is God saying, is he giving us false hope? Like, is the Word of God wrong? Or is the Word of God right? Because if the Word of God is right, then we actually can renew our youth. That's what it says in the Word of God. That's what it says. But we have to follow God's principles to do it. And it's interesting, Moses, he died at the age of 120. And just before he died, he just walked up the mountain. But he died. Well, wouldn't that be cool? Just to be so youthful and walk up a mountain and then just lay down and die? With no suffering and pain and no whatever else. So, often what I do in the seminars, I get people to do their homework. And the homework is to take a look at the workbook, fullpower1.com. You can download it, print it out if you want to. And then fill out the habit trackers. Fill it out. Just complete. Answer the questions 1 to 10 for each principle and see how you do it. That would be the homework there. And here it is. This is what it looks like. And here's the vitality test on page 7. I'll just read 2 questions, just to let you know. It says here, this is a snapshot of how you're feeling. And one says, I have healthy looking skin. I feel energetic. So on a scale of 1 to 4, you answer all this and it adds up to whatever your number is out of 100. And so that's how you feel. That's the feeling part. And then I won't read all that stuff, but that's what it is. And then this is the doing part. We change how we feel by changing what we do. And so this is just a summary of all the full power principles, lifestyle medicine, the science that came out of the Word of God and Spirit of Prophecy. And here is what you can do. It's on page 9 of the workbook. And you can just say, how am I doing on living a life of purpose? If you want help with that, you just go to the habit tracker and how am I doing on prioritizing high octane fuel? Which is, I'll talk about that today, just in a moment. How am I doing in water, drinking water, exercise? So that you can mark yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, put your score to 100, and that's what you want to change. You get that score up. That's the idea. That's in the workbook, and you can download it for free. Page 7, page 9, page 8 is just simply summarizing what. So you can do that at fullpower1.com. If you want a quick summary, just go to YouTube, write it is written Canada. And then you see I'll be being interviewed by Mike Lemon and his wife Renee. There they are, about this life of full power. And so that's what the book looks like. And who won it? Well, someone won that. Yes. You won the book. Here's the table of contents. parts. Part 1 is the fold chapter. Part 2, the power chapter. Part 3 is the full power implementation program. So that's kind of what that is. I won't get too much into it at all. So, I will begin with this quote from Dr. Dean Ornish, who is perhaps one of the most spectacular scientific researchers on health through lifestyle medicine. And he wrote these things. Lifestyle medicine often reverses the progression of the most common chronic conditions. Now, the emphasis on the most common chronic conditions, not just one, but like the most chronic ones, like 10 of them or more. Why? Because they share the same underlying biological mechanisms. So what's good for your heart is also good for your diabetes, for it to go down. It's also good if you have cancer. It's also good if you have asthma. It's also good if you have other diseases. So what's good for one is good for all the other chronic diseases, which is really wonderful. Why? Because the underlying biological mechanism is the same for all of them. The symptoms are different. For example, a heart attack produces pain and pressure in the chest, and it reduces our abilities. But you can have a heart attack in your brain. What do they call that? That's a stroke. They say, well, that's a stroke, it's a heart attack, it's two different things. Not really. A stroke is a heart attack in the brain. It's really a stoppage of the flow of blood. Now, if it happens in the brain, it's called a stroke. If it happens in a heart or an artery nearby, it's called a heart attack. But it's the same underlying mechanism. And that's what full power and lifestyle medicine addresses, the underlying mechanism. Does that make sense? We cool with that? So I know you can't read this too well, but there's a reason why I put this in small words. The full power principles, lifestyle medicine, nature's formula, same thing, improves biological mechanisms, which reverses symptoms or pain or suffering. So I'm now going to expand on this sentence. So put up on top there, and then I'll put down here and here and here the three parts of that sentence. So the full power principles lead to the improvement of biological mechanisms, which in turn, remember the domino effect, which in turn leads to the reducing symptoms like pain or blood pressure too high, whatever. So, full power principles, here they are. Omit what is harmful, multiply your life, rest up. These are the principles. When we follow those well, then that leads to these mechanisms in your body. Chronic inflammation, your immune system, it improves the circulatory efficiency, lengthens telomeres. What's a telomere? Anybody know what a telomere is? It's fascinating. There's a lady, Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn. She won a Nobel Prize for discovering telomeres. They are like the end of the chromosomes inside your DNA in every cell of your body. It looks like the end of a shoelace. You know that the little plastic part at the end of a shoelace? When we are born, we have a long telomere. And every time the cells reproduce, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So you can take a look, if you're a doctor, you can take a look at the length of the telomeres, and the shorter it is, the sooner you're going to die. Interesting. So they can almost predict like the year you're going to die by looking at the length of your telomeres. And Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, she got a Nobel Prize for that. And she worked with Dr. Dean Ornish. The doctors, this was about 15, 20 years ago, the doctor says, well, nobody can lengthen your telomeres because they just automatically get shorter and shorter every time it's reproduced. The cells reproduce, DNA, because our DNA and all that stuff. So they say it can't be done. But Dean Ornish showed that when you follow the full power principles, you can actually lengthen your telomeres. Which means that you don't need to die when they say you're going to die. It means that you can live longer and healthier. It is possible. It is possible. blood vessels. Genesis is the beginning, so the beginning of blood vessels. In other words, producing new blood vessels all the time. That's what it does. And so it helps us to do that. Microbiome, that's all the bacteria in our gut and this stuff. Autophagy and apoptosis. This is basically, imagine a construction site. You're building a big building, a house, and there's all this garbage around. And you take away the garbage. This is what this happens in our body. Our bodies are always producing trash inside every cell. And so that needs to be taken away. If it's not taken away, we feel that as tiredness. We feel that as, oh, I just don't want to do anything. Well, it's because our autophagy and apoptosis isn't working efficiently. The garbage needs to be taken away and brought to the kidneys or liver or exposed completely. Well, following these principles helps that to happen. And then neurological activity. In our brains, we think better, we remember better, we have more positive emotions, all that because of following lifestyle medicine full power principles. So we have the full power principles improves the biological mechanisms that underlie or reverse these symptoms. What are those symptoms? Here are just some of them. Coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, autoimmune diseases, obesity, cellular aging, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, early stage prostate cancer, depression, etc. So this slide is actually quite a powerful statement to make, because this actually comes from our Creator who invented these mechanisms in our bodies, and our Creator who doesn't want us to have all the suffering that so many of us have. So he's given us an example and some wonderful things to do that we don't have to suffer so much. Isn't that wonderful? So it is possible. There is a barrier which we'll talk about, but so far it is possible. So let's open up our treasure chest and see what's. Oh, look at that! Wow. Tell you, these health principles are worth gold. They're worth gold. You can have all the money in the world. You're not healthy. You can't do much. How can you enjoy life as much, right? They're worth gold. So this one is FULL, POWER. The letter P stands for prioritize high octane fuel. And we're calling it fuel. Let's call it what it is. Food is fuel. Well, what some people call food is poor fuel. But we want high octane fuel. So that's why we call it that. Does that make sense? So, eat for strength is another way to say it. Let's eat for strength. Now, remember this morning, these guys? Because I told stories about every one of these right here. This is Frances Greger. She's one who at 65 left Florida, went to Predican Health Center. She was given 1 year to live. And all of these actually were given 1 year to live. All of them. And she comes back and she just, despite the doctor, she lives another 30-some years, 36 years or whatever it was. Amazing. And she was the one who had the grandson named Michael. Today, and by the way, I'll probably tell it later, but there's a website called nutritionfacts.org, produced and created by Michael Greger. If you have questions about things to eat or about health, go to nutritionfacts.org and put in the search bar there something about deep fried foods, or something about arthritis, or whatever you want to put in there. He's got videos, probably, 600, 700, maybe 1,000 videos, all about 5 minutes long. So just short videos on these kinds of subjects. So it's wonderful. That's Dr. Michael Greger, the little boy, 10-year-old boy of this lady who lived to 97 years old or something like that. So do you remember his story? What's this guy, Fred? What do you remember about him? He what?
He was on all kinds of pills.
He was. 24 pills a day he was on. That's what he told us when he came into the health program. 24 pills a day. Do you remember anything else about him? Was he a delightful person to be around? He was a grump. He was an ornery, grumpy man. And that's why this 1 year, all these, 1 year to live. So, and he was hobbling down the stairs, and then he used the principles, and now he's just running across that beach. 1 year to live. How many of you, don't tell me, have just 1 year to live? Hope that you're not that bad. But even if you are, there's hope. And John proves it. John proves it. So right there, that's a little bit on them. So here's some antioxidants. Blueberries, strawberries, raspberries. This WFPB stands for Whole Foods Plant-Based. Whole Foods Plant-Based. Some people say vegan or vegetarian. I don't use those words too much. I use Whole Foods Plant-Based. You know why? Because you can be a vegetarian and drink beer and eat potato chips. And that's not healthy, even though it tastes good. So it's not so much being vegetarian, it's eating foods the way they're grown. Like an apple from the tree, not an apple pie, for example, would be an example of that. Whole Foods Plant-Based. So the eating pattern and lifestyle that reversed heart disease also prevented and reversed diabetes, which I said already. But it's such an important point. Because you could have heart disease or you could have diabetes, which are among the top diseases in Canada for which drugs are prescribed. We can deal with it. Again, I'm not promising any overnight cures. I can't do that. But I can tell you that at least an 80% chance if you're diabetic and you're more recently diagnosed as one, type 2 diabetes, you have a better than average chance of reducing your diabetes. The newer it is, the greater your chances are of getting rid of it. So according to Dr. T. Colin Campbell, he's the guy who wrote the China study. He said, pardon? It's a great, great book, the China study. Amazing book. Studying like almost 1 billion people in China. People say, oh, it's just the genetics, just genetics. It's not just genetics. If it was just genetics, then all the Chinese people that were studied, they all had the same genes. But they died depending upon what they ate. That's what they discovered, and so much more. So he was the basically the director of that study, which lasted for years. And he says nutrition is the master key to human health. Nutrition. Here's an example of that. Anybody here recognize any island here at all? What?
Samoa in there.
Samoa? Where's Samoa? There's Palau right there.
I see Pacific Islands.
Okay, here's the Marshall Islands right there. So a lot of islands there. There's Solomon Islands, so many. Where's Samoa? Where's Samoa? You were born in Samoa, right?
No, I wasn't born in Samoa. I was born in Hawaii.
Oh, Hawaii.
It's by Tonga. Samoa is by Tonga.
Yes?
It's by Tonga and Fiji.
Okay, I know it's there somewhere. Closest I was in, say, Taiwan. I was up in Taiwan doing similar to what I'm doing with you. Yeah, you looking for it? Val? Where? There you go. So you lived there. You weren't born there, but you lived there.
No, I didn't live there. I visited.
You
But that's
visited,
that's
okay.
the island of my ancestors.
Your ancestors from. Okay, that's what it is. All right, there you go. So look at all these islands. And I had dinner with Val yesterday. We went to the restaurant.
Tandoori.
Tandoori.
The
Indian food restaurant. And he was saying to me that on the Samoan Islands, back a long time ago, everybody was fit and healthy, right? Fit, strong, the strongest in the world, I think he said. Someone told you that. And now, not so much. Why? Because processed foods came in. Same in the Marshall Islands. Let me share with you a little about the Marshall Islands. Diabetes in the Marshall Islands is the highest in the world. In all the world, Marshall Islands, highest in diabetes. But it was not always that way. Back in the 1950s, only had 3 people with diabetes. In the 1950s, 30% of the population. In Canada, about 12, 15%. But they're 30%, 1 out of every 3 people. And they ate Spam, donuts, ramen noodles, and cola. That's what they ate, and no wonder they got sick. The hospital admissions, half of them, 50%, were due to diabetes. They had poor sleep, and they had pain in their arms, legs, and joints, and half the surgeries that were ever done were amputations. Diabetes, the blood doesn't get through to the end of your fingers or the end of your toes. So you have to cut them off to save your life. And so they have amputations for that. So now, they introduced nature's formula, or lifestyle medicine, or full power plan. And they introduced it. 100%, what does it stand for? WFPB. Whole foods, plant-based. It's a good word, good acronym to think of. You can look up Whole Foods Plant-Based, WFPB, on the internet. And up will come some wonderful recipes to give your life more life. So they did that with them in the Marshall Islands. That's what they did. Very high fiber, 0 trans fatty acids, so no French fries. High antioxidants, low glycemic load, moderate sodium, and what else? 2 weeks later. Not 2 years later, not 2 months later, 2 weeks later. Are you ready for what they found? They introduced to them pretty well what's in the book, The Full Power Plan. They just have not heard of the book, The Full Power Plan, at this time. But they're introducing the principles that are in the Full Power Plan. 2 weeks later, decrease of pain in their legs, joints, and arms. There's a decrease in nocturnal bathroom visits. Massages were no longer needed in order to sleep. Walking became easier, and they had an increase in frequency of bulk of stool, so using the bathroom, getting rid of that waste, which we need to do. But not only that, 90% stopped taking meds for diabetes. 90% stopped taking meds for diabetes. But because of the underlying mechanisms of the body's systems, they also stopped taking meds for their cholesterol, blood pressure, and other meds. That's what 90% in 2 weeks. They got radical. They just looked at every bit of refined and processed food, basically food made in the factory, and they got rid of it. They didn't eat it. They didn't touch it, even though it tasted good. They didn't touch it. But look what it did for them. Look what it did for them. This is amazing. Their fasting blood sugar decreased. Cholesterol went down, triglycerides went down. It was wonderful. They were following a book written by this lady right here to do it. And this lady, she wrote a book. What's her name? Her name is Brenda Davis. She actually used to live in British Columbia, and now she's, I think, moved to Alberta. She wrote a book called Defeating Diabetes. Now remember John, who was running on the beach? He's given 1 year to live. John was following the same program as this one right here. Dr. Brent, she's not a doctor. Yeah, she is a doctor, actually, but she's a doctor of nursing and nutrition, not a medical doctor. She wrote the book, Defeating Diabetes. She worked with Dr. John Youngberg, a Seventh-day Adventist doctor, who wrote the book, Diabetes Undone. Together, they changed the people and their life there in the Marshall Islands. And this is them talking. This is Brenda Davis showing pictures of that all. Here's Dr. John Youngberg, who helped that guy John run on the beach so fast. This is the guy here who did that. And so these are real people who did real things to help make real differences. And that was wonderful. And now, so what do you think of that? I mean, I'm just totally impressed with what can happen. Doesn't happen overnight. But wow, 2 weeks? That's pretty well overnight as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so I was going through a store in Abbotsford called the Sprouted Oven, produced by the Silver Hills Bread Company. And I saw this book. And I need to get that book called Whole. T. Colin Campbell. He wrote another book. It wasn't just only the China study. He wrote another one called Whole. Rethinking the Science of Nutrition. I need that book. I went to pay for the book. They said, I'm sorry, but we're not selling that book. said, why not? Because it's not in our system. I said, put it in your system. I got to buy the book. We can't sell it to you. Come back in 3 hours. So I came back. They did not have it in their system. They said, tell you what, we'll give it to you for half price. So it was like a $45 book. And they gave it to me like for $20 or something like that. And it was well worth it. Here's the stuff that I learned in that book. Principle number 1. Think holistically, not reductionistically. What does that mean? Think in terms of the whole body, not just the body part. Think in terms of the whole food, not just a nutrient in the food. People say, get your proteins, get your healthy fats, get your carbohydrates. Don't think like that. Think, get your fruit, get your vegetables, get your nuts and your seeds and your legumes. That's whole food. So that's what they're saying. Think holistically, not reductionistically. Got that from T. Colin Campbell. How many here have ever heard of something called the Krebs cycle? Yeah, a few people. You had to go to school, you had to go to a particular class, maybe biology class or even something like that. The Krebs cycle is basically what happens when you eat food and it breaks down in your body, and it goes through all these cycles. So imagine digestion. Digestion is nothing more than taking big chunks and making them into millions of small chunks. That's what digestion is. Metabolism is taking those all into small chunks and then reassembling them into proteins and then sticking them everywhere else they're needed in the body. So that's metabolism. Metabolism is all the chemical reactions in the body to either pull apart or break down and build up. So, the Krebs cycle talks about what happens to various foods as they go, as they get broken down to smaller and smaller pieces. And each time it breaks down to the next piece is called a metabolite. And what T. Colin Campbell is saying here, this is the mapping glucose metabolism, what he's saying here is kind of complicated. Kind of complicated. And what doctors do, what scientists and researchers do, is they try to create drugs that affect the systems in our body. What T. Colin Campbell is saying is, that's a little arrogant. Why? Because we don't know how complicated things are. He says, you can give somebody a medication, and it produces a certain effect in your body. But what else does it produce? Something called side effects. He says there's no such thing as side effects, only effects. So that drug is supposed to affect one thing in your body. But because our bodies are intertwined with everything else, that one drug will affect 100 things in your body. And you can't control the other 99. So that's why he's saying it's more complicated than that. So let me just fill out the whole page. It actually is more like this. No, that is even the tip of the iceberg. It's actually more like this. All right? This is how complicated and interdependent one body part is on other body parts. One system dependent upon other systems. The immune system, the digestive system, the nervous system, all the other systems, the muscular, skeletal system, endocrine system, hormones, they're all interdependent. And so if you want to affect your body in a good way, we really need to think holistically, because all the systems are together as one. We can't just pick one thing out and affect that one thing, because affecting that one thing has a domino effect on 100 other things in our body. That's why it's best to think holistically. Our bodies, our minds are one unit. So this is what T. Colin Campbell taught me about that. It was, to me, an amazing lesson. So here's what he said. We now operate under a paradigm that looks for truth only in the smallest details, while entirely ignoring the big picture. God gives us the big picture. Amen. Our bodies are a unit. Our mind and bodies are together as one. Now, there will be a test, and I'm going to test you on whether you know all these vitamins. No, I'm just teasing. I'll read some of these, but this is what our body needs. And I'm going to purposely stress you out. telling you all the things our body needs. And there's good news after that. Vitamin A, vitamin B1, vitamin B2, B3, B5, B6, B7, B9, B12, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. I mean, some people don't even know vitamin K is even a real thing, but sure enough, they need it. What about calcium and chloride, chromium and copper and iron and magnesium and manganese and potassium and selenium and sodium and zinc? We need all that. We need all that, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. We also need water, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. We need fiber, amino acids, antioxidants, and omega-3 fatty acids. We also need phytonutrients and electrolytes and vitamin D and choline and trace elements and prebiotics and probiotics and coenzymes and phospholipids and hormones and neurotransmitters. We need it all. So are you getting yours? Are you getting it? How do you know? You don't really know. And so seminars are one of those things. Say vitamin K. Wow, I just heard about vitamin K. I got to make sure I get my vitamin K. And so you spend the next year of your life making sure you get vitamin K, but you missed out on vitamin D. And so the whole point is you can relax. You can relax. You know why? Because eating the whole foods plant-based way eliminates the need to worry about those details. You don't need to measure all those things. Just eat lots of different, emphasis on different, variety, plant foods. Your body will do the math for you.
Amen.
Isn't that wonderful? We are truly fearfully and wonderfully made.
Amen.
Our creator, our manufacturer, manufactured these things called a living organism, right? This living, breathing, organic piece of machinery we call the human body, made by the top manufacturer in the universe, who knows how your bodies are made. And he says, here's the high-octane fuel you put into it. Lots of apples and pears and carrots and beans and you name it, right? If it comes off of a tree, or in a garden, or on a vine, or on a bush, that's what it is. Here's an example. So imagine this is your digestive system there. Now look at this. This is the best illustration I could find of a human cell. Pretty complicated, isn't it? It's just one little stupid little neat little cell. We got like 40 trillion of those in various shapes and sizes. And let me see if we can even get a closer up here. This is your mitochondria that burns energy, produces energy for our bodies. There's the nucleus there where the DNA is and chromosomes and all that stuff. There's actually, this is another what do you call it again? Mitochondria. There's about 200, 300 mitochondria. The thing that in your cells that burn the energy in just one cell. When we have fruits and nuts and grains and vegetables, and greens and blueberries and raspberries and strawberries, and we have almonds and cashews and Brazil nuts, and we have pumpkin seeds and all that. When we have that, our cells love that stuff. They're happy. They're producing. They're efficient. But when we have fried foods, potato chips and French fries and hamburgers and cheeseburgers and all that kind of stuff, this starts to be depleted of energy. And so it produces less energy for us, the stuff that we need. And so it's actually bad news that we like that stuff. And basically, I love that stuff. I love that stuff. If I were to be tested on my addictive behaviors or addictive propensities, I'd be pretty high. So I need help. I need help. Here's something else I learned about thinking holistically. Now some people, they know that vitamin C is good for you. So they'll go and they'll get some vitamin C tablets in the store, and they'll have one or two every day, and they feel good, they get the vitamin C. But let me tell you something that I think would be good news. The process of nutrition is profoundly holistic in that the way the body uses a particular nutrient depends on what other nutrients are ingested along with your vitamin C tablets, that's just one nutrient. But he's saying the usefulness of that really depends on what comes with it. So let me see if I can read some more. If we just take an isolated vitamin C pill, now this also counts for vitamin E, and it counts for selenium, it counts for the pills that you go to like a health food store and you get some capsules and stuff like vitamins. If we just take one isolated vitamin C pill, we miss out on the cast of supporting characters that may give vitamin C its potency, its power. We miss out. How do we miss out? Let me share this with you. Let's talk about reductionism. Oh, I need my vitamin C. But what we don't need is vitamin C tablets. Well, we do need vitamin C. Let's see if I can explain this way. A half of an apple versus vitamin C tablets you get from the store. Just a half an apple. Half an apple. 100 grams of fresh apples, half an apple, had the antioxidant vitamin C-like activity. It's really good. Equivalent to 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C. I'm going to keep on going. When they analyzed chemically that 100 grams of apple for the vitamin C activities that it had, they found only 5.7 milligrams of vitamin C in the apple. So 5.7 milligrams, of apple, of vitamin C in the apple. And apples aren't even famous for vitamin C, right? Oranges and grapefruit and lemons, they're famous for vitamin C, not apple, but apple still has some vitamin C in it. Only 5.7 grams in just half an apple. But the amount of work that 5.7 milligrams can do is the equivalent of 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C. In other words, what we're saying here is, I'm going to write it down here, 263 times more potent taking the apple than taking the vitamin C capsule. This is the lesson. You want vitamin C, eat an apple. Don't get a vitamin C tablet. You're just losing out on what you could be getting by having the whole food. That's the whole point. So the saying is, and not only that, but apples have, I've read this, I don't know how true it is, but I read it, it seemed to be a reputable research article. Apples have about 5,000 chemicals in it. Apples, just a healthy apple. 5,000 chemicals. And scientists have only discovered the names about 3,000 of them. In other words, there's like 2,000 chemicals in the apple that we don't even know how to identify. But God knows. God knows. So he says, I want you to eat apples. Just as an example. Eat bananas and pears and everything else too. Apples, though, just an example right here. And that way, you not only get your vitamin C, but you get all the other things in the apple, all those 5,000 other chemicals in the apple that you need to help make that vitamin C powerful in your body. Does that make sense? Isn't that beautiful? We can save money now. We don't need to go and get vitamin C tablets. Just eat more apples, for example. Well, the same is true of any nutrient isolated from the whole food context. Any food that's isolated, for example, vitamin E, carotene, omega-3s, for example. Oh, I need my omega-3s. Well, eat walnuts. Get your omega-3s that way. Have flaxseed. Get your omega-3s that way. And then you get everything else that goes along with it to make it work. That's from the book Whole. From the book Whole. I recommend that book. It's a wonderful book. You can get it on the internet, on Amazon. So he says there, plant-based foods and forms, got to choose them, as close to their natural state as possible. Whole foods. So if it grows on a tree that way, like an apple or a pear, whatever, banana, what else grows on trees? A lot of stuff grows on trees, right? Kiwis, you know. Yeah, all those things, right? Or if it grows on a bush, like berries, blueberries and blackberries and raspberries and strawberries, if it grows that way, And if it's edible, I'm not saying eat flowers or anything, but if it's edible, then it's like, and the cells of our body just say, oh, thank you for that. So it says, eat a variety of vegetables, fruits, raw nuts, not salted nuts, raw nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, and whole grains. Fascinating, isn't it? It's just what Ellen White said 150 years ago. And now science is finally catching up. And God gave this health message to the Seventh-day Adventist Church for a reason, so we can not suffer so much. So the guiding question, but what should I eat? You want to know, should I eat this? Is it better than that, or whatever? Here's your guiding question. Does it grow from a tree, bush, vine, or garden? If the answer is yes, then it's probably healthy. But edible foods. The answer is no, then it's less healthy for you, and perhaps even harmful. So we don't need, he says, medical breakthroughs or genetic manipulation. Like genetic manipulation is all the rage right now. Oh, just split the genes and do this with your genes. Yes, she says we don't need that. To maintain and restore vibrant health, a half a century of research, both mine and that of many others, has convinced me of the following. What you eat every day is far more powerful, a more powerful determinant of your health than your DNA, or the most nasty chemicals lurking in your environment. And we know there's chemicals in our environment that aren't healthy for us. They're not. A lot of chemicals are not. But our food is 100 times more potent than even that. That's what he's saying. The food we eat. Getting your carrots and your broccoli. So I thought I'd put a few pictures of whole foods, plant-based on the screen. So tell me what these are. What's that? Is that an apple? How about that? Blueberries. High-octane fuel. High in antioxidants. What are they? Carrots. Are they strawberries? Green beans. Sprouts of some kind. Grapes, raspberries, the garden of vegetables. Some green, what's that? Green. What? Arugula. Could it be arugula? Yeah. Tomatoes, onions, carrots. No. Tomatoes. They're not tomatoes. What are they? Radishes. And so this is just an example of foods that our body loves, that will heal things in our body. This man here, I don't know what his beliefs are, but he's one of the world's richest people, and he's worth $20 billion or something. I found it interesting that even he says this. I start from a premise. I mean, he's asked, what's your secret? How come you got so rich? How come you're so successful? Top in the world in investments and whatever else. Says, I start from a premise that nature is smarter than I am. And try to let nature teach me how reality works. Getting back to nature, I thought that's the theme of what we're talking about here. Getting back to nature. I don't know what he believes about nature, but I tell you, I like what he said. He wrote a book called Principles. I'm reading it now. So the idea of holistic versus reductionistic, go to the root causes versus the symptoms, and use nature's remedies versus manufactured remedies. Let me talk to you about that. Nature versus manufacture. How are we doing for time? Okay? 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour, 2 hours. Oh, okay. You didn't tell me if I had 2 hours or 1 hour. I didn't know if it was 3 hours, 3-hour version or not. Have you ever heard or have read on the packaging in the grocery store, 30% less fat or 30% less sugar? Ah, great, it's healthy. I'm going to buy that. Not Coke, Diet Coke. All right, so, it must be healthy then. Let me share with you some reality. Imagine that the green 10 represents the healthiest food. And imagine that the minus 10 is the red, and that represents the most harmful food. Healthy on this side, on that side harmful on this side. So we have that. Now, let's just say a food, or I won't call it food, I'll call it a substance, called a hot dog. call it a Coca-Cola, call it Wham, call it French fries, potato chips, -9. And then you are watching TV, and it says, we're going to sell this to you, and it's got reduced sugar. So now it's no longer a -9, it's a -4. You say, it's healthy. I can eat it. It's got less sugar, or less fat, or less salt, or something like that. Well, my question to you, is it really healthy? Or is it just simply less harmful? That would be deception. Healthier is not necessarily healthy. It's just simply not as harmful, but it's still harmful. You're walking down the street every day, and every day somebody robs you of $20. And one day you're walking down the street, and then somebody robs you of only $5. Does that make you happy? Well, it makes you less sad. But are you happy for being robbed of $5? In comparison to 20, I suppose so. But you were still robbed, right? So this is the kind of thing here that we want to think of. Healthier is not necessarily healthy. How do you know the difference? The healthy stuff is produced by nature. The harmful stuff is refined food produced by man. Okay. God versus man. Trees and bushes versus manufactured. All right. Orange peelings, banana peelings, and everything, that's the packaging, versus something that's colorful packaging that's made of paper or plastic or some combination of them. That's the difference. That's the difference right there. Does that make sense? Right? Do you feel like educated? I felt educated when I learned that. Oh, I feel smarter now. I go to the grocery store. I'm not going to be tricked by some advertisement saying, 30% less sugar. Oh, really? Now I know it has less of it. What does it have still? So I read those ingredients, see what's there. If sugar is in the top 4 ingredients, I don't get it. Most of it. Unless I'm on a low, right? The ideal human diet: avoid heavily processed foods and animal products. Stay away from the added salt, oil, and sugar. Aim to get 80% of your calories from complex carbohydrates. Carbs are good and carbs are bad. Bad carbs are bad, good carbs are good. We need carbs. We need complex carbs, like what we find in apples. We don't need simple carbs, like we find in potato chips and chocolate bars. All right, so to get 80% of your calories from complex carbohydrates, 10% from fat, 10% from protein. This is from T. Colin Campbell, and it relates exactly to what the Bible has already said. Is eat from nature. God provides nature for us to help us. Isn't that wonderful? Now, guess what? The effect of eating this way is so powerful that if there were a pill that could produce those effects, like the people in the Marshall Islands in 2 weeks, 90% were off their meds, 90%, right? Can you imagine having a pill that produces those effects? How much money would you save? Not only that, but if you produced those pills, how much money would you make? You'd make like billions of dollars producing those effects that already is found in raspberries and strawberries and apples and bananas and pears and peaches and carrots and spinach and kale and you know what I'm saying, right? It prevents 95% of all cancers, including those caused by environmental toxins. It prevents nearly all heart attacks and strokes. I think that is quite a list. I think that's quite an amazing thing. So here's our blood vessels. Red blood cells, white blood cells, that's all part of the immune system. They're like the bodyguards that beat up the bacteria, the bad bacteria. Now watch what happens when we eat the harmful foods, the manufactured foods, and usually the tastiest foods. Isn't it sad? The foods that taste the best are the foods that cause the worst trouble in our bodies. It's not even fair. It's not even fair. It's just sad. And so it creates cholesterol, and then so that produces what's called ischemic heart disease. Ischemic means not enough blood is getting through, and that increases the blood pressure. blood's trying to get through, it's pushing against the walls, increasing blood pressure. And so if that kind of a pill, whole foods plant-based, WFPB, were a pill, it reverses even the severe heart disease. It prevents and reverses type 2 diabetes so quickly and profoundly that after 3 days on this drug, the whole foods plant-based protocol, basically full power, it's dangerous for users to continue to use insulin. So if you're going to suddenly go on the full power protocol plan, tell your doctor, because he needs to monitor the sugar in your blood. He needs to, and then he'll reduce the insulin as needed. So let your doctor know. Because you're attempting to reduce the medications that you can. I'm not saying get off medications. It's not up to me. It's up to you and your doctor to talk about it. But if the doctor can see what's happening in your body, then he will make adjustments accordingly. Remember I told you about April, a lady named April? April came to our program last year, and our program was called 1 Week in Paradise. They came from Ontario. Medical people came to BC, worked together with them, and now we've renamed it. Now we're just doing it in BC. It's happening next month in June. And last year, people had to pay about $2,300 to get there, just for 8 days. This year, we got it down to $950. And this was a lady who paid the $2,300. Her name is April. She lived in Mission. She lives in Mission. And here she is sitting at a table. Look what she's eating. Can you tell? That's fruits, berries, looks like grapes and stuff like that. She's eating there. Now, she walks in, and she sits down with the health counselor. And coming up in June, I'll be one of those health counselors. And she says, working with the health counselor, my blood has been taken, here's my weight, here's my cholesterol, here's everything, what I have going on. She had 4 goals. Goal number 1, get her weight down. Goal number 2, reverse the heart disease that she had. Goal number 3, reduce the diabetes. And goal number 4, walk again. Just walk. She was walking, but with 2 canes. And so we had her going for walks, 2 walks a day, after lunch and after the 3rd meal, which was very small. So then, just about 3 months later, I meet her again. In 3 months. I meet her at Camp Hope, last camp meeting time, and she comes into the health tent. The health ministry. How many know that at Camp Hope, at camp meeting, we have a health ministry's tent? Okay. Well, we do. There's a health ministry tent, and we can do certain checks on you. And we give you a massage as well, a 5-minute massage. Well, she comes through, and she says, "Here I am. Now I'm walking without needing 2 canes." She lost 35 pounds. Her doctor says she no longer has heart disease. And she's now off of all diabetic medications in 3 months. That's April. That's her right there. She's my friend now. She happened to call me up. She says, "I hear you talking about your wife so much. I want to meet your wife." Because obviously my wife is so kind and loving and everything. And so she drove from Mission to see a friend, and she thought she'd see us too. And we went for a walk together. Her and I, she got to meet my lovely wife, June is her name. And so she's a friend now. And she is so happy to have found a new life with this health message. And she, for the summer, she got into her car, and she's driving all over British Columbia, just enjoying her life so much, because she could do it. She could do it now, where before she couldn't do it. It's just so wonderful. Amen. So I'm going to, I want to get, probably end off maybe a few slides after this. Little video here. In the book of Daniel, chapter 1, Daniel had what I might call the first scientific experiment, where you have what we call a control group, which is a group of, say, 50 people that you do nothing with. And then you take another group called the experimental decided to do that on rats. Why rats? Well, number one, they're cheap. And number two, they have digestive systems which aren't too far different from human beings. They're different, of course, but you can still learn from them. One rat, they fed that rat a regular standard American diet. What's standard American diet stand for? S-A-D. SAD diet. Okay, basically junk food. Fast food, high fat, high sugar, high salt food. The other rat, they fed a whole foods plant-based diet. So the equivalent to fruits and nuts and grains and vegetables and legumes and beans and all that kind of stuff. And then they decided to do a test on both those rats. Here's what the test was. They take a rat and they drop him into a vat of water. And rats, of course, they don't want to drown, so they're swimming for all their worth. And in the vat of water, there's this little island of safety that the rat has to find, swim to it, and then get on it to save their lives from drowning. The test is, how long does it take to get them to find that island? All right? Because if they can find that island fast and get to it and swim there, that's good. That's life-preserving. But if it takes them a long time to get to that island in the middle of the water, they could eventually drown. So it makes quite a difference what you eat. So here is the experiment. So they take the rat, here it is, drop them in the water, look at them swimming around. Looks like milk almost, but they say the water. Oh, found right away. Look at that. Okay, and the doctor's saying it took 5.2 seconds. Now here is the rat. Guess which diet he had? He had the SAD diet. He had standard American diet that most people eat. He passed right by it. He's still looking. He can't figure things out. And so here's the doctor explaining. The food that we fed that rat caused the rat's brain to lose the ability to think, to lose the ability to reason. Even had a bit of dementia. Finally, he finds the island, and they mark down the score. And the answer is whole foods plant-based rat, 5.2 seconds. Refined food rat, 36.2 seconds. Doesn't that tell you something? The food we eat affects our bodies, and it affects our reasoning power as well. It's just amazing. I think that's quite amazing. So guess which is which here on this one? You can tell, right? Green versus brown. Brown and white. Green and green. A little bit of blue there. You see your test group, your control group. Is this high octane fuel or is this low octane fuel? Low octane. There's high octane fuel. That's what the blue zones would eat. The blue zones places in the world where people live the longest. There's a blue zone there. Too much. This is what happened to find my wife's cookbook from Dr. Dean Ornish. And it's got all these quotes in there from Bill Clinton, Clint Eastwood. And Clint Eastwood says, Dean Ornish's program is great, it tastes good and all that stuff. And there's Clint Eastwood, I don't know, 25 years ago or something. He's 92 years old or something like that. I didn't meet him, but I was in his restaurant in Carmel, California. I asked the lady behind the table, I said, is this where Clint Eastwood comes? She says, yes. I said, do you see him? Oh, I see him every day. Oh, am I going to see him now? Probably not. He's already in today. I said, what's he like? You know, I've seen him on these cowboy movies or whatever, you know, looking tough. He's 6'4". And the lady said, oh, he's 90 years old and he's still a charmer. That's what the lady said to me. He's still a charmer, 90 years old. How can he live so long? Because he's eating whole foods plant-based. That's Clint Eastwood. I thought, well, that was interesting. So I'll maybe end up with maybe a couple more slides. These are the healthful foods. It's colored in a green box. No argument on that these are healthy for you. These are the unhealthy foods. There's no argument, so that's why it's a red box. In the middle is what's debated. Okay? What's debated? Poultry, eggs, dairy, and fish. Debated. So, if you want to have certainty from this box, maybe a little bit from this box. You must, but prioritize this box. The full power plan in the book, it only deals with what's in this box. The certainties of what will make our bodies happy and healthy. Right here. There's much more we could say, but I won't say that. We could talk about the other things as well. So, oh, should I eat this or should I eat that? Yeah, you could. It probably wouldn't kill you, you know. But this, the best. Whole grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. So here's some examples of high octane fuel. So here I am in my kitchen. What? You don't like what I'm eating? What we're trying to say here is to get those muscles, you don't really need all that meat. You can get it from greens and beans. And there's Dr. Michael Greger right there. Take a look, nutritionfacts.org. Dr. Michael Greger. You can see, here's some of the videos. Blood pressure, arthritis, coffee, weight loss, turmeric, depression, acne. You know, it's got so many topics there. You're just going to put it in. See the science on it. You've even got an app. You can say Dr. Greger. So here's some more whole foods, plant-based. Just go through these so quickly. Just to give you an idea. To get these pictures in it. This is the food our body is craving for. The problem is it has to get past our taste buds. It's interesting, our taste buds. We have like 10,000 taste buds. What do we get? The fewer we have. Some people who are older have only 5,000. But we have 40 trillion cells of our bodies. And sometimes we let the 10,000 taste buds tell what the 40 trillion cells of our bodies get. It's too bad that the 40 trillion cells of our body don't have taste buds. They don't. Tongue causing us to have those tasty toxins, which I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to share my story a little bit. As I said, it's not pretty. People always ask where you get the protein from. You don't eat meat? Where you get your protein from? You ever heard that before? You got to get your protein, so where you got to get your meat? That's what they say. Look at the strongest animals on land. Where do they get their protein from? From plants. Where does this 500-pound gorilla get his protein from? He could take on 20 men easy. He's strong. He's very fit. His muscles are filled with protein that comes from the greens in the bean. What about the charging buffalo or the galloping stallion? Where do they get their protein from? They get it from plants. They get it from plants. Even this Olympic weightlifter, he got his protein from plants as well. Even this champion, what's her name? Serena Williams, right? Champion tennis player. She says, I fell in love with the concept of fueling your body with the best way possible. What is it for her? Vegan, coconut water, cucumbers, mint, kale, that's what she says you'll find in my refrigerator, especially when she's in training and tennis. She's retired now, but it's quite amazing. Here's a doctor. Her name is Dr. Angie says, and she says, eating a whole food plant-based diet has given me incredible strength in comparison to when I was in my 20s, eating meat and dairy. I'm able to push myself harder than ever before, and I feel amazing, she says. My recovery time is shorter than ever. I'm able to train every single day despite my busy work schedule as a medical doctor. She says back in her 20s, she looks like she's in her 20s right now. But no, she's like 40 or something like that. How she looks so young because of what she is eating. So I won't talk too much about that. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger right there. And he's basically staying on a vegetarian diet. His cholesterol went to the lowest ever in his entire life. He said that when he was 69. I'll just do one more of this slide here. These aren't Olympic bodybuilders. They're all local to British Columbia. British Columbian bodybuilders. And every year they go to Abbotsford. And they have this bodybuilding contest. One of those guys is 63, I think, 62, 63 years old. And they compete in areas, in age groups. But there's nobody else in their 60s you could compete against. And there's nobody in their, I think, even 50s. He had to compete against the 40 to 50-year-old range. So I don't know if you can tell which one it is, but it happens to be my friend named Ron Donatelli. He's him there. He only ate twice a day, whole foods plant-based. He lost 5 pounds in order to get into the competition. And he's the oldest one there. He's 63 years old. He's about my age, so now he's 65 and I'm 65. The other guys, they ate meat. They ate 5 times a day. They had to lose 30 or 40 pounds to get into the competition. And they're between their 40s and 53 was the oldest guy. So Ron is 10 years older than the oldest guy. And he had to go into an age group younger than himself just to compete because nobody his age. And how did he do it? By eating whole foods, plant-based. That's my friend Ron who lives in Seminar. Anybody know him, by the way? Yeah, you know Ron Donatelli. That was a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago. So I think I'll stop right there. I'll just stop right there. So any thoughts or questions before we go? Did I talk too much? That's what I didn't say. I didn't have time to say it. But thank you for saying it.
That was your last slide.
It was, yeah. So you can see I skipped that part.
If you turn it back just a couple, you'll see it.
The protein they were actually using was casein. That's why I put that up there. Casein is no protein. So yeah, this is what we find. Milk, ice cream, cheeseburgers. Oh. So you want to go back to there? Is that it? Right there? Okay. When cancer was switched off for a relatively long time by feeding a low protein diet, not high protein is all the craze right now. I mean, it's all get your protein, eat lots of meat, get lots of dairy. No, that's marketing. That's not science. This is science. So thank you for bringing that up. Since you brought it up, I'm going to talk about it now. So yeah, you can switch off cancer. The beginning stages of cancer, by cutting down your protein. And they tested out on casein, which is a milk protein, dairy protein. And it could be turned on again by switching to a high protein diet. Don't let the marketing trick you into eating high protein diets. Get the protein from greens and beans and kale. You don't need a high protein diet by going to a store and getting the protein powder, nothing like that. Keto diet is all the rage too, isn't it? And it's just not healthy. Short term, you can lose weight for sure, you can do that. But weight is not the only thing you want to deal with. It's health you want to deal with. All right?
I heard keto was okay, but you need to switch your protein source. So if you want, as you mentioned, a protein source that is whole food plant-based, then the keto diet can be done.
I would add one more thing to that, which is true what you just said. The keto diet says have a low amount of carbohydrates. I would say no. Eat a high amount of carbohydrates if they're complex carbohydrates. That's a big difference, big difference. Some people say, oh, stay away from carbs. Well, it really depends on what you mean by carbs. And what they are saying and meaning is refined carbs. So get your carbs, but get them out of an apple. Get them out of a pear. Get them out of carrots and kale and beans and whatever have you. So yeah, good point. So I think I'll stop there. Any more thoughts or questions on that? How are we doing for time? Started at what, 2 now, 3:30? I can't believe it. guy talk for an hour and a half? Is that what you did?
Well, we did start a little bit after
Oh.
2, so.
Okay. Yeah, very well. So, any more thoughts or questions? Are you getting it? You see the good news? There is bad news, isn't there? What's the bad news? I want to be healthy. I gotta give up stuff I love eating. That's the bad news, and that's what we'll talk about tonight.
All right, church family, what do you think? Huh? A lot of good information. You know, it's important because when you look at what's happening in the hospitals and the amount of, when you go there to the hospitals, and I know that emergency rooms get full, booked, and now a lot of times people complain because the doctors aren't really giving, because they got so much on their caseload, right? So it's important for us to understand it can make a big difference in our health, not only in our, but also in our moods, our energy, and to live life. And Jesus says he came that we could have life what? In what way? In an abundant way, right? He wants to give us an abundant life. So these are really good things, and these are all backed by, again, big time science and these longevity studies, all of these things. So good information. I pray that you will come back as well too at 7 o'clock. We're going to have our other one. So if you did not get one through our drawing, there is a way that you can receive one. If you make it to the rest of these, and that's 2 more sessions, we will give every person who's made it a book. We'll walk away with a book, all right? So we want to give you an encouragement to come, because these are life-changing things that we can take and we can apply. Even if you hear it, it's good to try to take this information and take some of the things, try to incorporate it in our life. So if you didn't get one of these, even in our drawing, you'll get one if you come to all of it. All right. So that's at what time? What time is the meeting tonight? 7 o'clock tonight, and then tomorrow we have one at 11. Okay. With that said, I don't know if you have any final words before we close. Okay. So we want to encourage you to come. Bring a friend. Well, let's have a word of prayer. Father, we are so grateful and thankful that you love us so much, Lord, and you want us to have an abundant life. Lord, you not only give us spiritual principles, but also health to take care of the body, the mind, the heart, everything that we need for life, Lord. Lord, you care for us. Father, as we continue to listen and gain the understanding, the knowledge, Lord, we pray that you will continue to work in our hearts, Lord, so that we would want to live that abundant life and take these health principles to heart. Be with Brother Ern, Lord, as he continues to prepare for our next session and bring us back for that session. Thank you for hearing our prayer. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.